Okay, but we're 3 minutes past 12. We might kick things off now. So welcome everybody. Thanks so much for coming in. So we want to cover off first and foremost. I know a lot of the people on this call are a part of the LawPath network. So thank you so much for joining us as part of this call. So for those of us who have come through from referrals or heard about this event elsewhere, LawPath is an online legal service provider primarily aimed at helping small businesses to get access to all of the legal support that they need. We do this through a number of technology-powered legal solutions, end-to-end contract management, helping with all of the different registrations that your business will need, and also on-demand access to legal advice. So we aim to be able to help you with these problems at a fraction of the cost and the time of what the traditional system would offer. And to date, we've been able to help over 200,000 businesses save over 100 million in legal fees. I notice a few people from this call are part of our network, and we've got some new people on here. So thank you everybody for joining. How we're able to assist on this side of things. Obviously today we're going to be very much focused on, I guess, the accounting perspective of what you can do to ensure that you're eligible for this support, and then what are the next steps that you can take. But we're able to help when it comes to everything around the contractual arrangements, dealing with employment-related issues, and any of the legal considerations that come up. We have a fresh updated COVID-19 Resources hub. We've got a range of new guides in there covering things like employment, stand down, debt collection, lease considerations, vaccination considerations. So if you do have any questions on how you handle things within your business at this time, it's a great place to check out. And I know I can see a few people are already on our legal advice plan, but for anybody who is looking for legal advice on demand, we can help you with any legal questions that come up as part of you being a part of our legal advice plan. So please check that out. And we do have access to a range of different legal documents, over 350 legal documents to be able to support your business, and a lot relevant to this time around things like remote working policies, different arrangements around workplace policies, contracts, changes of contracts. So we're able to assist on that. So you can get your first free legal document by heading to the link that we've entitled there if you're not already a member. So that's LawPath, but we're really here today to hear from Pat. Before I pass over to Pat, one thing I did want to just launch now to get an idea of who we have on our webinar today. I've just launched a poll. You'll be able to see that there's answers for that poll that have come through. So we really want to understand where you find yourself as part of being able to access this business support. Have you gone about yet applying for the COVID-19 business grant? Have you been paid the business grant yet? Some of you might have been fortunate enough to start receiving payments for this already. And then another question, one of the things that I think is going to be really relevant to people on this call, I know there are a lot of new businesses that are looking to apply for the COVID-19 business grant and trying to get an understanding of how eligibility plays into a part. So I'll just give everybody a bit of time to complete those questions in there. It looks like a lot of us have found those polls, and we're getting the answers flooding through now. So thanks for doing those. And without any further ado, I'll pass on to Pat, who's going to lead us through the presentation. Thanks, Pat. Take it away.
Thanks, Tom. So just a brief disclosure. So the advice is general in nature, and obviously if you need tailored advice, please speak to your accountant or legal sort of practitioner, and it could also be POP or LawPath. So please get in touch if you need specific advice. So my name's Patrick Sargent. I'm the CEO of POP Tax and POP Business. We're an online chartered accounting firm servicing businesses right across Australia. And sort of our focus is helping people build their dream business. That also includes helping people through times like this, where we want to be at the forefront of providing the right information to make sure you get the cash you need to continue with your business as soon as possible, and also get you sort of as much stimulus as you're eligible for. So I'll go through a couple of things today. I'll go through the micro business grant, and I'll go through the JobSaver grant. It'd be interesting to see, Tom, did we get some results back from that initial poll regarding the COVID-19 business grant?
Yeah. So we've got so far, we've had about 150 people complete that poll thus far. So thanks for everyone who's doing that, and please fill that in if you find the time. So we've said that we've got people who have applied for the grant. We've got 22% of people have applied for it. We've got 63% on the call who haven't, and 14% who haven't and are looking for some assistance in relation to that as well. And for those who have been paid the grant, we've got 96% of people still waiting to be paid the grant or haven't received that yet. So just a small amount have actually received that so far. And for new businesses that we have looking to apply for the business grant, it's actually very evenly split. We've got 50% roughly of new businesses who are trying to apply, who maybe don't meet the kind of the default criteria, and the other 50% do meet that.
Great, thanks for that. It'd be interesting to share if anyone has applied for the COVID-19 business grant that is a new business and has been successful. It would be really interesting to share that in the Q&A chat. Initially, they said to contact Service New South Wales and they'll do a manual application for businesses that don't meet that specific criteria, as in going back to 2019 and checking the turnover to then. And also the 75K in sales you might have started in 2021, there's a specific clause that says you could still be eligible if you've been affected and you have met the 75K. So it'd be interesting to see if anyone has gone through. They did tell us they would update the application form, and I don't believe that's been done. And so it'd be interesting to hear any sort of businesses out there that have gone through the application process and they are a new business and have been successful, and how they went about that. Was it a manual application when you called? And if you've heard anything back in that respect, it'd be great to share with the group so they can see what to do for the COVID-19 business grant, which was the last webinar. Has anyone touched base on that, Tom, or I'll keep going?
We've got just a couple of people who have come through and said that submitted the application to Service New South Wales, haven't received feedback yet, waiting to hear back. We've got somebody who's received a portion that is waiting for about half of that to come through. So looks like there's a lot of people who are still after a bit of assistance and still waiting to hear.
Excellent. I'll go through the micro business grant first, and this grant is it's an ongoing payment of it's just to take a step back. So the initial COVID-19 business grant was if you had over 75K in sales in 2020. This is if you didn't meet that criteria and you've had 30K to 75K in sales. For the 2020 period. So you may be eligible for this micro business grant. Basically, a little bit about it. It's a fortnightly payment of $1,500 per fortnight, $750 per week. Eligible businesses may include small businesses, non-employing businesses, such as sole traders and not-for-profit organizations. And so the eligibility criteria is you need to have a business that operates in New South Wales as at 1 June 2021 or previously. You need to have an aggregated turnover of $30,000 to $75,000 for the year ended 30 June 2020. You need to have experienced a decline in turnover of 30% or more due to the public health orders, so the lockdown, for a minimum 2-week period compared to 2019. You need to have business costs for which there's no other government support available. You must not have applied for the COVID-19 business grant or the JobSaver. The reason being, those grants are covering if you have more than $75,000 in sales. So basically, you do one or the other. So you wouldn't have been eligible for the COVID-19 business grant, as your sales wouldn't have met that turnover criteria. So you can't apply for those 2 other grants and still get this grant. You need to maintain your employee headcount. And this needs to be your primary source of income if you're a non-employing business. So that's really important. And a couple of other really important ones, which we're getting a lot of questions around, is this COVID-19 disaster payment. That's the one that was available very early on, and it was $600 per week back then. Now they're saying for the micro business grant, you can't get the disaster payment grant and this grant. I'll run through the JobSaver separately because it looks like you can get both for that. However, for the micro business grant, if you have been receiving the COVID-19 disaster payments and you're a non-employing business, you can't apply for the micro business grant. If you are an employing business, you can receive this grant as well. So basically it's, if you don't have employees and you're getting the COVID-19 disaster payment, you can't apply for the micro business grant because they're kind of facilitating the same thing given the turnover level. If you're an employing business, they're saying if you have employees and you've maintained those employees, you can get the disaster payment and the micro business grant. Did we have any questions around that, Tom?
I don't think specifically on that, no.
Excellent. The funding may be used for basically business expenses. So it's to facilitate, it's to support, you know, you maintaining employees or paying your bills. And that could include, you know, utilities, rent, other business expenses you have. The point of it is, as long as you're spending it on sort of business related expenses, it should be fine. And you need to keep the evidence you're spending the money up to 5 years on your business related expenses. And so we've got a test here, and basically another key point is this one runs to 30 July. So it's a 2-week period from the 26th of June to 30 July compared to a same 2-week period back in 2019. And so in this example, basically it's pretty straightforward. If you had higher income back in 2019 and you have less income in 2021 and you've exceeded the 30% decline in turnover, you may be eligible for the $1,500 fortnightly payment. There's a few key things. So like, what is turnover? What's the definition of turnover? And it appears that they use the ordinary concepts for GST. If you're not registered for GST, I'd envision it would just be your total sales, and whether it's a cash or accrual basis. I believe it would be based on how you report to the ATO. So if you report on a cash basis, you'd probably use the turnover for a cash basis. If you report to the ATO on an accrual basis, I believe you'd use that. And a few definitions which are pretty self-explanatory. This is obviously if you have below than 75K in turnover, and you need to have a certain amount of employees, less than 20, which would be pretty common at that turnover level. And a micro business owner can be a sole trader, a partnership, private company, or a trust that carries on a business. It's just important to note that you do need to be carrying on a business. And if you're a non-employing business, it does need to be your primary source of income. So if you're a sole trader, this is your primary source of income to be eligible for the micro business grant. And this is quite a common question that we've been getting a lot. So what if 2019 is not a good test period? And this can be for businesses who are not operating the full year of 30 June 2020. You may have been affected by drought, bushfires, or other natural disasters. There may have been a restructure or business disposal acquisition that's impacted the turnover. There could be sickness, injury, or leave. And so all it says is businesses in these circumstances should contact Service New South Wales to determine if an alternate comparison period or alternative supporting evidence can be applied. And so what this is saying is, if we cannot use 2020 for the turnover, if 2019 is not a good test period for the sales back then, more than likely, if your revenue sits between 30 and 75K in 2021, and you can show a decline in turnover of more than 30% or more, you should be eligible to apply. So it's basically saying that they will most likely accept alternative test periods. How that will work practically, we aren't sure yet. They're just saying to contact Service New South Wales. And again, for the COVID-19 business grant, they said to call up and they'll do a manual application. I think they got flooded and they just, found that that wasn't a great way to do it. So we had clients calling up who were on the phone for hours and hours, and in the end, they didn't get any help with Services New South Wales, just saying, we're still working on it, etc. They did say that update the form. So I believe for the micro business grant, they'll update the form eventually, or you'll manually apply. I think if the cash flow is really urgent, you should definitely get in touch with Service New South Wales and ask for some guidance around the alternative test period. And a few things regarding this supporting evidence is a key one. So with the micro business grant, a letter from a qualified accountant may be required, or you could use a business bank account statement or a BAS or a notice of assessment. The key will be how easily you present the information for Services New South Wales to review your claim. And so if you format it in a really clear and succinct way, and you show the 2-week dates, and you can verify the evidence for the turnover, and that can be in the form of a tax return or notice of assessment, or a BAS, most likely not a BAS if you're below the 75K for the micro business grant. So it'll probably be an income tax return or a notice of assessment for that criteria. And then for the decline in turnover in that 2-week test period, it's most likely going to be either an accountant's letter or bank statements showing the income coming in during the 2 weeks, and very clearly showing the decline of 30% or more.
So Pat, we just had a question come through. Just, can you use any BAS, or would it have to be specifically the one on 30 June 2021?
Yeah, so I think it depends on what you're trying to show. If you're trying to show the sales, I think it would be hard. You'd need to use the bank statement or the accountant's letter for the turnover decline. And then if you're showing the total turnover, they do say BAS, but for the micro business grant, I think your safest bet is just giving them your tax return for 2020. That would be the easiest option, because this one's income to and from, right? So we're trying to work out if your income is between 30K and 75K. So if you just provide one BAS, it's not going to have enough information to show if for the full year you were between that threshold. So what they're trying to do is they're just trying to gather evidence so they can tick the box and say, yes, your income was between this for this period. Yes, you've had this decline in turnover. So I'm not sure how the BAS would be a good support evidence. They have this as their supporting evidence in their key terms, but I think for practically, if they're reviewing it, they may request further information. So it might be easier to just submit the income tax return, and then either an accountant's letter, that'll be the best bet, because then it's going to do the declarations and it's going to show the 2-week periods. It's going to have the exact turnover amounts and show the percentage decrease, and it's going to be, third party certified. That'd be the easiest option. So that and your income tax return. If you weren't going to do that and you're going to do it yourself, you definitely need like bank account statements, because it's going to be a specific period that it covers. You could potentially use the accounting software to show between these dates, this was the sales.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, Pat. One more question that came up a couple of times. We've had a couple of questions in different ways of how it's been asked, is people who have applied for disaster relief and now want to apply for micro business. Can you just clarify what would be their best outcome for being able to be able to resolve that? What are the steps that they could take?
Yeah. It's a good question. And basically, if you're applying for the micro business grant, you can't get the disaster payment and the micro business grant. So you get one or the other. I would stay on the disaster payment, because they've increased it today from, they've just announced they've increased it from 600 to 750 a week. And so it's the exact same amount of money now. Yeah. So the disaster payment now is $750 a week. The micro business grant is $750 a week. So they're the same. It's the same amount of money. If you're receiving the disaster payment, you can't apply for the micro business grant. If you're a sorry, I should really clarify that. If you're a non-employing business, so if you're a non-employing business, so you don't have any employees at all, then you can't get the micro business grant and the disaster payment. However, if you're an employing business, you can apply for both grants.
Great. Awesome. Super helpful. Thanks, Pat.
No worries. So there's a couple of eligibility tests to determine, to go through to see if you're eligible. So we'll share the link for this and you can go through that in your own time. Was there any final questions on the micro business grant just before I jumped into the JobSaver grant, Tom?
Yes, there are a lot.
There's a lot.
So I'm probably just trying to sift through the ones that we've gone through and some of the new ones that we've got in there that don't cover that. There's a few very specific questions that are going to be quite difficult for us to cover here. This is probably an easy one for you, Pat. This is only applicable for New South Wales, right? It's not specifically this grant applying to Victorian businesses.
Yeah, correct. So this is just for New South Wales. You can be located outside New South Wales, but you need to be operating within New South Wales. Victoria have just announced further grants and support, so we'll provide an update on that in the near future. So there is more grants and support available for Victoria, but yeah, this is purely centered on New South Wales.
And then there's a question here about if a business is able to show projections as part of its revenue testing and eligibility on that. I assume that's going to be a difficult thing to be able to do, but do you know the answer there?
I don't. Are they referring to they're a new business and they don't have
Correct, yeah.
30K to 75K in sales? I mean, I would just apply for the disaster support, given it's $750 a week. So it's the same amount of money. And I'd only look at doing both if you were an employing business and you were getting the disaster payment and you had employees and you really needed the cash to pay the employees as well, then yes, you could try and do something on that front. However, I'm not certain around that. I think if you're a new business for, say, the COVID-19 business grant, Services New South Wales did say if you can show you've got quarterly income above, I think it was 18,000 or something, to show you're going to exceed $75,000. They were accepting that. So, I mean, this was the feedback from someone there. So you may have a case, and it's definitely a maybe. It would need to go through a manual process. But if you could show, yes, you're definitely going to hit 30K, but you're a brand new business and you haven't hit it yet, but you are severely impacted by COVID, and you have employees, then I would definitely get in touch with Service New South Wales to get clarification on that. If you're a non-employing business, you're not eligible for the micro business grant anyway, so I would just apply for the disaster payment.
Awesome. And there's a question here around, Jose's asked, what if it is an employing business, but there's only one employee who is the director?
That's a good question. And I believe the director is an employee, so you should be able to apply for both.
Great. Cool. I think that seems like we've covered that single business director. Okay, I think we can move on, Pat. If any other questions comes through, we'll try to get to the end. Everyone, we'll try to cover them all.
Yeah, and so the criteria for this is really similar to the COVID-19 business grant that was just previously done. So if you've done that and you're qualified for that, you're probably going to qualify for the JobSaver grant. And it's if you've got 75K to 50 mil in sales and turnover, I should say, back in 2020. If you can demonstrate you've had a 2-week decline in turnover compared to 2019, and if you're maintaining your current staff levels at 13th of July, it says yesterday this was prepared for the COVID-19 business grant, then you could be eligible for this grant. It's basically 40% of the New South Wales payroll. It's a minimum of $1,500 per week, a maximum of $100K per week. So just today, they've announced they're increasing it from $10,000 a week to $100K per week. So massive change. To get the $100K per week, you need to have over $200K in weekly payroll. So basically, they've expanded it quite a lot. One of the key things is if you've got over 75 grand in turnover back in 2020, you've had a decrease in sales, but you don't employ anyone, you can get $1,000 per week. So it's slightly less than the $1,500 per week if you're an employing business. And so the eligibility criteria, it's really similar to the micro business grant and the previous COVID-19 business grant. So again, you've just got to operate in New South Wales and be affected. You've got to have turnover between 75K and 50 mil. You've got to have experienced that 30% or more decline in turnover back to the same period, the same 2-week period back in 2019. You need to have maintained your employee headcount. And for non-employing businesses, the business receiving the payments must be the primary source of their income. And same as the micro business grant, you can only use the grant on business related expenses. That might be wages, rent, utilities, marketing. Basically, if it's a business related expense, it's pretty safe to say that it should be included. And like there's a bit of text underneath saying, like, the primary objective of this payment is to help businesses survive, maintain relationships with their employees, and be in a period to trade when restrictions are lifted. So as long as you're spending it on business expenses, that should be fine. If you're in a highly impacted industry, you may not need to provide an accountant's letter. We have seen having to provide the accountant's details instead of the accountant's letter within the application form, so that Service New South Wales can call up and verify information if it needs to speed up their review process. If you're not in a highly impacted industry, you will need to provide an accountant's letter for this claim. And so that's a JobSaver. It's pretty straightforward. If you qualified for the COVID-19 business grant, you should qualify for the JobSaver, given the minimum decline in turnover for that was 30%, where it went 30%, 50%, 70%. So if you received that grant or you were eligible, you should be eligible for this grant. If you're a new business, or if your business, it wasn't a good test period, it's the same as the micro business grant in that, and the COVID-19 business grant. You may be able to use an alternative test period. Again, we're still waiting for guidance around what's the best way to do that, given that the application form is quite specific, and it basically says it has the dates within the questions, and if you say no, you can't proceed. So if you're a new business or you're on the fringe, I strongly suggest you get in touch with Service New South Wales for clarification around the alternative test period. From what the clauses say, it makes a good case that if you're a new business and you've hit 75K in sales for 2021, say, and you've experienced a 30% decline in turnover, I think you should definitely get in touch, and you're more than likely going to be eligible. It's just the practicality around the application form is yet to be seen. And so we're just waiting for guidance around whether you do that within the form or whether you call up. They're saying to call up at the moment, but based on us getting in touch and our clients getting in touch, they're just at the moment they're not giving us any clear indication around how to apply. But I believe you will be eligible So this is really support for businesses that have had a decline in turnover. They've maintained their employee levels. They've definitely hit the 75K in sales, so they should be eligible. There was a good question earlier around the disaster payment. So what if, can you get the JobSaver if you've received the disaster payment? And the answer is, I believe, if you're an employing business, you can. And if you're a non-employing business, I believe it may be harder to get that. So if you're an employing business, as in I'm a director, I pay myself a salary, you may be eligible for both, because it doesn't stipulate who the employees are. It just says if you are an employing business. So if you employ, if you're a director and you're paying yourself a director fee or a salary, then technically, and from a legal standpoint, you're an employee. So it doesn't say directors are excluded. We have seen that in previous clauses and stimulus back when the JobKeeper and all that was coming out. They made mentions of how to treat directors and shareholders. But for this, it's literally just said employee if you're an employing business. So I believe you should be able to get the disaster payment and this grant. And I just made a little note, disaster payments increasing from 600 to 750. So the announcement today was just basically disaster payments increasing from 600 to 750, and the JobSavers increased from capped at $10,000 per week. Now it's capped at $100,000 per week. So now it's supporting a much larger portion of the wages for those sort of middle-sized businesses. How can we help? So we can help with your accountant's letter. We can do the eligibility tests, review the turnover of your business back in 2019, and obviously try and maximize your claim for your COVID-19 business grant. Or we can help you with the accountant's letter for the JobSaver or micro business grant if that's required. And I think we'll go to questions now. And I'll try and tie off what I can. So do you want to jump in, Tom?
Amazing. Yeah, thanks so much, Pat. There's really informative there. I definitely learned a lot by listening in, and it's good to have a little bit of clarity, because I think that's what a lot of these people on the call are after. And I know that we've got a lot of questions that have come through around people's individual situations. And so as you can appreciate on the call, it's difficult for us to be able to give you the exact answer for those. So we're going to try and keep it really where it's a general question that's going to be able to benefit the group as well, and be able to assist. So I did see a couple of questions come through, Pat, around people who were directors of multiple businesses and being able to put in multiple claims. Has there been anything that's been said about the ability to do that?
Basically it's centered around the ABN, so you can only apply basically each business is treated as a separate legal entity, and each business can apply for grants on its own accord. I think you would need to be a little bit careful regarding I think from the JobSaver, if you're paying yourself wages from those businesses, I don't think there should be too much of a problem with that. But I would tread carefully around if you don't meet the certain requirements, like if you're not an employing business and you've got a lot of different businesses that aren't employing, it does need to be your primary source of income. And so you can't claim multiple micro business grants when, if you're non-employing and you've got 10 non-employing businesses and you're just, trying to get a grant for each one. It needs to be your sole purpose, sole source of income, main source of income, sorry. So that's where I would be careful. But in saying that, each business can apply for these grants and could be eligible for these grants. And as an example for the JobSaver, if a director is getting paid salary from a couple of businesses and they qualify for the JobSaver, then that should be totally fine to get the grants for those wages.
Great. We've got a question. I've seen a couple of questions similar to this one as well, where people have said that they've secured a contract, and it might be an annual contract that would, go above the turnover requirements. However, within a period of time with lockdown hitting, that contract's now been broken, and they haven't been able to continue the remainder of that contract. Do you have any clarification on how things would work in that situation if the money was kind of signed and locked in, and now it's unavailable?
It's a tricky one. I think there's a good argument to say that you would have earned the 75K if that's what they're alluding to, and not the 30. There is a potential argument. However, I think they would have needed to receive some income for, say, a portion. Like what we've seen is if you've received 18K in a quarter, you can use that to show that, hey, I've received 18K in this quarter, or 20K, whatever it is. For the year, I would have earned 80K, right? So we have seen that. And they did come back saying that you can use that for the 75K. So my only thought would be, if some of the income from the contract had been paid and it was for a period before leading up to the lockdown, and it would have shown that you could have far exceeded the 75 or exceeded the 75K, there is an argument, but I can't say for certain. I would definitely call up and seek clarification around that. I think it might be if you've received quarterly payments of 18K or more, it should be okay. If you haven't, then I think it's going to be a bit harder, but you can definitely sort of call up and try and, get an alternative date period to use.
Awesome. I think that's really helpful. Okay, we've got a couple of others that have come through. Oh, we've got lots of questions that are coming through there. They're flooding in at the moment. So I did mention one before. This might be an easy one. I think Glenn's just after a bit of clarification on the disaster payments. Is it a reduction of more than 20 hours or 20 or more hours required to qualify? So I think maybe if it hits right on 20, if that is allowed as well.
Yeah, I think it's 20 hours or more. So if you've had your hours reduced by 20 hours or more, then you could be eligible for that one.
I'm not sure if there's a good answer for this one, Pat. If you pay your employees monthly, how should you calculate your weekly wages in the application? Should it be to divide the days in the month, multiply by the days of the week, or multiply by 12 months and divide by 52?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, that was one that's really doesn't have enough information on it. And going through the form, that was the one thing that stood out to me regarding, it does ask for you to calculate your weekly average wages. And I would use the most recent month, if that makes sense. That would be the most logical way to do it. I don't believe quarterly could be a good indication of the average weekly wages if your business was growing up until 30 June, and then all of a sudden you've got no work, but you're keeping your employees on. So I believe for the month would be the best way to do it. But yeah, there's no guidance on that within the form. So yeah, I'm not too sure, to be honest, how to do that. But I think what I can do is find out regarding that weekly wages element, and I can provide some clarification, and maybe I can share it when we send something out in follow up for this. So if you keep an eye out, we can provide some clarification around that point.
Great, fantastic. I think there have been a couple of questions. I think you may have covered this already, but we are getting a number of questions still through in relation to businesses that have $75,000 of turnover or more, but don't have any employees. So not kind of considered as maybe an employing business who are paying any employee wages right now. Are they entitled to receive anything? Yeah, good question. So they can get the JobSaver. The payment is $1,000 per week. So they can definitely still apply if they meet the criteria. If you're non-employing, so basically if you're employing or non-employing, you can apply for either the micro business or the JobSaver. The difference is the turnover. So if you've got more than $75,000, but you're non-employing, and you can show you've decreased your
turnover, then you could be eligible. It needs to be a primary source of income. So that's what I was mentioning about the directors in multiple companies. So as long as it's your primary source of income, you'll be able to get the JobSaver, which is $1,000 per week.
Fantastic. Just sifting through. I reminded everyone to, when you're leaving your questions, don't put them in the chat, leave them in the Q&A so we can look to tackle those. I think we've gone through a lot of these. We'll see if any new ones are coming through that we haven't covered. Question from Linda, can you please answer my previous question about can you use the first period of lockdown, June 26? It's based on comparing 2021 with 2019. I'm not sure if that's enough information for you to be able to work that one out, Pat. Can you use the first period of lockdown from June 26? I assume it's related to the turnover requirement.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, so the 2-week period can start from the 26th of June. If you were in the affected area that was on the border of Victoria, I believe you can use a period starting a month earlier than that. Yeah, and so the 2-week period for the JobSaver starts on the 26th of June, and same with the micro business grant. So it could be your 2-week period, is from the 28th of June to the 12th of July. Or yeah, so you can choose which 2-week period. Like how we do it, we basically get the turnover each day back in 2019, and then we get the turnover for each day back in 2021, and then we find the highest decline in turnover. So we get the daily income each day for basically the start of the lockdown up until today's date, and then we compare the sales decline in turnover basically for 14 days, 14 days, 14 days, 14 days. So that's how we do it to try and find the highest decline in turnover. That was for the COVID-19 business grant because it was tiered. So you got more back when you had a higher decline in turnover. So we did it every day to work out which period we could get the highest decline for. For this one, you only need 30% decline in turnover for a 2-week period. So it should be a lot easier to find. I believe you can use the same accountant's letter from the COVID-19 business grant for this one. So there is some new declarations, I believe, so it might be worth just getting in touch with your accountant to determine whether you need something different signed and provided to speed up the application. They're getting massive volume and things are really slow. Like with the poll at the start, people saying over 90% haven't received their grant yet. They're getting a lot of volume. And so if you've got information that's not complete, then your application will certainly be delayed. So the more information you can give that really clarifies your situation and why you're eligible, the quicker they can tick their boxes and pay you your money.
Just an update on that poll as well. It looks like now only 5% have been paid the grant thus far. So I know there's a lot of people who are still waiting for that. We've had a couple of questions come through that probably just need a bit of clarification. And I assume this is an easy one to cover on based on if an employee's weekly hours is affecting the headcount conditions. So I think people are trying to ask if they reduce employees' hours, that's not an impact on headcount, is it?
No, it's not. So it basically says you just need to maintain the employee-employer relationship. So if you decrease hours, as long as you're keeping those people employed, then they should be okay. And if their hours are getting decreased, they can also look at the disaster relief payment if their hours are getting decreased. So there is support available to employees as well. And if you decrease hours, but you maintain, so the goal of this is like, when this finishes, they want everyone to be employed at the same levels as when it started. And to do that, they want to pay you some money to keep people employed. So the point of it is to maintain your employee-employer relationship. And, if their hours are decreasing, then they should still be totally fine to be included in the maintained employee headcount criteria. I think Damon probably touched on like stand downs and things like that.
Yep.
So he's probably really well suited. So if you have specific questions from an employee relationship around standing people down, definitely get in touch with Damon and the LawPath team who'll provide clarification for that specific point.
Absolutely. I'm going back to a question from Vinay, who's asked, for measuring decline in turnover, it says that ATO GST concept needs to be applied. Does it mean the same basis on which entity is lodging its BAS? So entities lodging BAS on a cash basis have to necessarily follow the same basis for measuring the decline.
Yes, I believe that's what that means. Yeah. So if you're registered for GST on a cash basis, then you'd use GST for your turnover. So if you're trying to satisfy the 75K, you'd need to look at how you're registered for, and it's pretty specific, like 75K is where you need to be registered for GST. So I'm assuming that you would be registered for GST to receive the JobSaver and or the COVID-19 business grant, given you need to do 75K or more. Usually if you have 75K or more, you are registered for GST unless you're a not-for-profit or another business that doesn't need to, but the vast majority of businesses do need to at that 75K mark. So you would look at cash first accrual, how are you registered for GST, and you'd use that methodology based on your GST registration.
You also had a question come through in the same vein there of somebody who had a turnover of over $75,000, but only recently. So they actually hadn't applied for GST. Is that a set requirement, or is that something that they can do at a later stage?
Yeah. So you basically, what the rule states, it's when you sort of when you know you're going to exceed the 75K, so you'll need to register. But I think separate, just coming back, like they were accepting if you had over 18K in sales for, say, the June quarter. So you would have exceeded 75K for the year, but now you've had a 30% decline. And so and you may not have been registered for GST, right? Because you just started and you weren't going to exceed it within that financial year because you started in before 1 June, you might have started in May, right? So I think if you can show you would have exceeded the 75K, then you might be okay to apply. In that case, cash versus accrual, where you just use your turnover. I don't think you'd be looking at GST because you weren't registered, so you weren't taking the GST out. So it's kind of irrelevant whether it was cash or accrual.
Awesome. I got a question here, quite specific around franchises. So who is eligible for the business grant, the franchisor or the franchisee, given they have different ABNs and both satisfied all eligibility criteria met? $75,000, 70% reduction in turnover over the comparison periods. I would assume, am I correct in saying it's both, Pat?
Yeah, I would be careful. So I would look at the type of income that the franchisor is receiving. So if it's passive income, it might not be eligible for these types of grants. So as long as it's a trading business in the sense of more than 80% of your income, 80% or more is from genuine business trading versus passive income, and that could be royalties and things like that, which may be considered passive. For that one, I'd get specific advice. It would depend on the nature of the income. If it was a trading business, then for sure both could apply because it's per ABN. But just for that specific one, I'd be really careful around the passive income requirement.
Great, awesome, thanks, Pat. I'm glad you're here to clarify that. I'm not giving the advice there. Great. Okay, we'll leave it up for the two more questions before we wind up. We've got, just having a read through on what we've got. does a letter from your accountant also include a letter from your BAS agent? BAS agents are not necessarily accountants.
Yeah, so it specifically says that they will accept letters from BAS agents as well. So you can use a tax agent, a BAS agent. So yeah, you can use your BAS agent for your accountant's letter as well. There's a specific list of the people that they will accept the letter from, and BAS agents were definitely within that list.
Okay, great. Cool. From Linda, for the micro business grant, if you pay employees less than $1,500 per fortnight, does that rule you out for the full $1,500 fortnightly grant payment?
So for the micro business grant, it's just a one-off. It's capped at $1,500 per fortnight. It's irrelevant how much. It's irrelevant whether you pay wages or not, if that makes sense. So to answer your question, if wages are less than $1,500 a fortnight, you'll get $1,500 a fortnight if you've met the criteria. So it's just a flat amount. It's irrelevant whether you have wages or not. You might not have wages, and then it needs to be your primary source of income. So it's kind of irrelevant. You just get a fixed amount. Same with if you've had more than 75K. If you're a non-employing business, it's flat at 1K a week. It doesn't matter if you pay yourself. If you're a sole trader, it doesn't matter what you earn. You're just going to get 1K a week. If you're on the JobSaver, this is an important one that might cover off some people. If you've got over 75K in sales, but your wages are less than $1,500 per week, then you get $1,500 per week. So it's the minimum payments $1,500 per week for the JobSaver. So even if your wages are less and you've met the other criteria, you could get like an excess amount where you're covering the wages and you're getting a bit extra. Won't be for many people, but that's a possibility. And same with the micro business, there's a possibility that that you weren't earning. So it's 750 a week, but the grant starts when your sales are at 30K, right? So say if it's just you in the business, you might even be getting paid more from this grant than you would have otherwise without it. Only a little bit, but there is that possibility.
Great. Awesome. Thanks for clarifying, Pat. I've probably got time to see if there's any questions in here that we haven't covered. Pat, this one might be a bit specific. I don't know if you can answer. Do you know, someone's asked if schools are eligible as long as it is school fees that have the reduction?
I'm not too sure, to be honest. I'd need to check. There's a list of businesses that aren't eligible. Maybe it depends on how the school's funded, because it says that government entities and some specifically funded businesses may not be eligible. So I can't say for sure on that one. I'd definitely seek specific advice for that type of business. School fees generally, yeah, that's should be considered trading income. It's definitely not passive income. And so if it is genuinely running a business, but yeah, I'd definitely speak to your accountant, because that one, they'd need to look into the guidance to provide specific advice for that one.
Okay, great. Well, I think probably the last question to ask is, Pat, how can everybody get in touch with you and your team? What's the best way of being able to reach out for any specific questions that people have?
Yeah, for sure. So we'd love to help as many of you as we can. We're an online chartered accountant, service businesses right across Australia, and industry agnostic. So if you need a hand, definitely get in touch with the grants and or your accounting and taxes. There's an eligibility test that we have. There's links within this presentation. The guys might even post it in the Q&A or the chat. So I think that's your best bet. Do the eligibility quiz, and there should be an option to get in touch as well. So if you have need any specific advice, or if you've got any questions, or if you just need a good accountant, yeah, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to help you.
Awesome. You'll see in the chat, everyone, that Chris has shared an inquiry link for getting in touch with Pat and the POT team. and also links to the micro business and JobSaver eligibility checks. I know a few people have asked if there's any way to access recordings and slides. Yes, we will make sure that we share a copy of the recording. Will go up on our YouTube channel, and we will share access to slides as well. So we will email those out to everybody who's attended following on from this. So thank you so much for everyone who's come along. I hope we've been able to clarify a few of these areas. A massive thank you to Pat for going into such great depth with this and offering his expertise on this area. I know it's a busy time for you, Pat, so we really appreciate you taking the time. And as more updates come available, we're really, the webinars we've been doing for now have been focused on New South Wales businesses. And as there's new updates around New South Wales business, we'll look to see what other areas we have, and we'll reach out to see what you would like to know more about and what we can do to assist with that as well. And also what's going on in other states. I believe Victoria has some new business support that's being released soon as well. So we'll leave it there for today. But again, thank you very much to everyone. Big thanks to Pat for being such a fantastic presenter for today. And wish everyone the best and see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.